Hey, everybody. I want to say thank you for showing up. This has been exciting. We're in 16 film festivals with the House, as well as 4 Documentary of the Year awards. I thought that was interesting. And then Rachel, Sylvia, and I activated Antelope Valley, California. Right? That was the weirdest thing because we went on a Q&A and they were more horrified that everything was happening, and then they had the same issue, but they had it where it was hidden behind third-party laws, which is even more dastardly. But this entire thing really started over at the House Republican Caucus when I was working over there as a videographer. Happened to go to Tenino for one of your wonderful meetings where we had more armed guards than we did people. And apparently DSHS and DSC couldn't show up, and then went up to Enumclaw, and it just compounded from there. And I went over to archives and kept finding out stuff about the little boy from Tacoma, as well as Diane Ballasoites' murder, which this kind of covers as well. And it's how the Special Commitment Center, all of that came about. One of the people I met during this was Sylvia Peterson, who really has done a lot of work, but also knows a lot about the Special Commitment Center, both from her time as being a visitor there, as well as your husband's, interaction. And I think it's
my husband was not a sex offender.
Sorry, no, I'm sorry, but
was a bit sketchy, didn't you think?
But the component, and there is one in there where you will meet, or at least see, is one of the people that they just dumped off in Cheney, which is not that bigger than Tenino, and they didn't tell anybody. And she now roams free. Mm-hmm. So, anyway, Sylvia Peterson.
Good night. Thank you for being here. This documentary is really personal to me. My grandfather, my grandpa Ed, began molesting me when I was 7 years old. And before you watch what Troy Kirby has created, I want to talk briefly about what the effects of sexual abuse are. A little bit about the sexual predator, Laura McCollum, that I spent 9 years visiting at McNeil Island. And then just suggest perhaps a takeaway from tonight. Do you really know why rapists and pedophiles are so dangerous? I mean, it shouldn't be a knee-jerk reaction. Do you know why this is so horrible? It's because sex crimes destroy the humanity of their victims. I often thought I would much rather have been dead. It would have been kinder than to live my whole life adjusting and compensating for the abuse. And what I mean by them taking away our humanity, it takes away our understanding of who we really are, because all we can see is who we were forced to be in that moment. And it takes away what we think we could achieve in our lives, because we don't think we have any worth. Why would we achieve anything? And it takes away our ability to trust and find purposes for our life that bring us joy. That is the basis of being human. Perpetrators leave big wounds in our souls, and that damage is permanent. No amount of medication, no amount of psychotherapy, or even just psychobabble. There isn't a crystal ever been dug up that is going to fix it. No amount of loving kindness can fully repair that damage. Now, with support, we may learn how to manage that pain and go on and have lives, but that injury is permanent. It will never go away. Survivors don't like to talk about how their abuse affected them years and sometimes decades later. And if you're in this room and you are a survivor of abuse, I want you to just take a minute and just inhale and exhale. 65 years after my grandfather, I'm still afraid of intimacy. I've been married to the same man for almost 30 years, but will I be able to stay mentally and emotionally present? Or like that, will I revert back to this little child who is in this place of horrible pain and shame? Now, sometimes I'm really slow to trust, and other times I trust when there are red flags everywhere, and my friends are saying, Sylvia, you need to get away from this person. Oh, no, I trust them. I don't make good judgments about trust. And addictions, alcohol, drugs, food, anything that might numb me for even just a moment, I would try it, and if it helped a little, I would like it. By the way, I just want you to know, I am of the opinion that Entenmann's chocolate donuts are a superfood. So I brought some in case I get hungry. However, when I was going over to the island and meeting with Laura McCollum, my weight ballooned up to over 300 pounds. Remembering my grandfather and listening to Laura talk about her abuse that she received and that she gave was such a trigger to me that I felt safer the bigger I got. I just wanted to create walls that would protect me. You know, if you were behind me in the grocery store line today, I'd probably look fairly normal, nothing special. But if you could look into my heart, you would see the outline of my grandfather in my scars. He will be there forever. I began seeing Laura because I wanted to know what makes people do that. What made my grandfather, on what world is that okay? What are people thinking? And so I thought maybe if I understood, then that insight would lead me into a deeper and sustainable healing. And that was my goal. Laura McCollum is just one of the violent sexual offenders that you will see in Troy's documentaries. 20 years ago when I started seeing her, she was an anomaly. We didn't think that women molested children. And at that time, there were only 3 in the United States. If you Google it today, you will find 22 pages of just women. But if you dig a little deeper, most of them committed their crimes with a male or as part of a sex trafficking ring. The women didn't do this by themselves. Why did Laura? You might think, well, you know, maybe it was to hide things or, you know, she just didn't want to share. No. Laura's abuse in her childhood was so dramatic and so extreme that she grew up believing that orgasmic intimacy equaled love. Who wouldn't want that, right? In 1990, Laura Faye McCollum was arrested and convicted of molesting and nearly killing an 18-month-old. If there is anyone here tonight who thinks that babies have not yet developed the ability to remember and be affected by trauma, don't leave with that same belief, because I met this woman. And when I was typing my notes, I couldn't type it. I am still so traumatized by what I experienced through her. She is permanently, mentally, emotionally crippled by what happened to her as a baby. After completing the prison sentence, Laura was assessed too dangerous for release. She was sent out to the Special Commitment Center, and I started seeing her just a few months later. At the time of her commitment, experts diagnosed Laura with a deviant arousal pattern that was very ingrained and dominated much of her functioning. sink in a minute. A deviant arousal pattern that was very ingrained and dominated her daily functioning. She was eventually considered safe for community release and moved into an apartment in Lakewood. After a psychologist reported that she had progressed in her treatment and no longer met the criteria for civil commitment. Laura had a number of conditions she was required to meet, and all of those the state felt would help to keep the community safe. A month later, Laura was arrested when she violated one of those conditions, when she accidentally accessed the internet, which she wasn't supposed to do. Oh, and then, by the way, while they were interviewing her, she admitted that she had been stalking and having violent sexual fantasies about a 6-year-old girl in her neighborhood. The judge returned her to treatment at the SCC. 9 months later, she was released again, this time to an apartment in Spokane with no conditions, no oversight. The community was not notified. I found out because I got a phone call from a mom in Spokane who said, I have heard a rumor that. What should I do? Her psychologist, this just infuriates me, her psychologist said that Laura still suffered from a pedophilic disorder, but he couldn't say with certainty that she was likely to abuse children again. In other words, she was released because her psychologist could not adequately predict her future behavior. Does that make any sense to you? I can't even predict my own future behavior because I probably will eat one of these donuts on the way home even though I'm not planning to. Well, the one thing I do know, it would not be safe for you to move me to a donut shop. One of the things I learned about Laura is that she didn't want to continue harming children. She really didn't. She knew that she was addicted to deviant sex. If there'd been a pill that would have fixed her, she would have taken it. If there'd been a treatment modality, she would have signed up for it. She knew she was a mess. She knew she was dangerous. And the last time I met with her, I asked her about her fears going forward, and in a completely candid moment, she said, Sylvia, I'm afraid they can't fix what's wrong with me. And if they can't, how can I ever have a home? My hope is that you will leave here tonight not enraged that government failed us, that people weren't notified, and it should have gone better. But that you will also realize that it is a complex problem. We have the ability, however, to make a difference. All of us, just right here. And you can do it as soon as you walk out the door. Regarding the men and women who have already been identified as dangerous, we have got to work through our elected officials for policies that are balanced and that maximize safety. That is the courts and the prisons and the treatment facilities and local law enforcement, and housing, all working together for what is best to keep everybody safe. And we need to keep the sex offender registry. And communities do need to know when offenders are moved in there. Frankly, I wish there was a registry for automobile thieves and drug dealers, because I'd like to know when they move in my neighborhood also. Secondly, You're not going to be able to recognize 90% of the sex offenders. They haven't been arrested yet. They are the grandma Eds. They are at the mall, the grocery store. They're out walking their dogs. They watch our children and grandchildren play with their friends. And they buy lots of Girl Scout cookies. And they sit next to us in church, and they always show up for family reunions. And I am talking about the grandma Eds. And that is the terrifying reality of our culture today. This documentary is just part of it. It rolls on and on when you leave here. You know, we have a very sexualized culture that we have the ability to change. Where we spend our time, where we spend our money, and what we think about will change our culture. And I believe that we can make this a safer world for children, for my grandchildren, and going on in perpetuity. And I'm so grateful for what Troy has delivered here tonight. Thank you.